Welcome, everybody, to the third official meeting of the Ontario, Canada obelisk of the Novus Ordo Luciferi. Today we have a guest on that is a member of the NOL. His name is Larry L., and we are going to bring him on now. So let's see here. Let's bring him in. Okay, here we go. Welcome, Larry. Welcome to the meeting, and we are going to talk about the journey from exoteric religion to esoteric spirituality. So if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that brought you here.
Sure. Hey guys, what's up? My name is Larry, as Terry mentioned, and I grew up in some really toxic flavors of Christianity, just defending people from the cops of holiness. A lot of your real ultra holiness. You used to have a lot of the fear of death, fear of hell, stuff, and just climbed out of that hole. In particular, I deconstructed it in a way I think that's absolute mandatory if you're going to ever make the jump from exoteric to esoteric religion. So along the way, I met Jeremy many years ago when I was first stepping out of the church, looking into the esoteric arts and things like that. And we've met long ago, and he's helped me along the way many times.
Cool. So, what form of Christianity were you part of?
Jeremy, pardon, I'm not hearing you in Skype. Should I be? There, I can
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So, what form of Christianity were you part of?
Assemblies of God, and my mother's own terrifying brainwashing. I don't know what you call that.
Okay. And what was it that actually led you out of exoteric religion?
Well, I got into the place in my Christian studies where I'm going to close this YouTube one if it's distracting me. Where, and I memorized huge amounts of the Bible, knew it really like the back of my hand, and um, studied all the denominations of Protestantism, Catholicism. And I was really, memorized a lot of work, and actually was working at the time with 5 international ministries, putting their content online, being a network engineer, things like that. But what I started to see was that there's just some stuff about that doesn't work. First of all, I could spend hours on this. We won't tonight, but is understanding the gospel correctly, the way the reformers did. But then I got to a point where I realized, okay, this isn't working. I'm still tormented. I'm still afraid of death. I still have all kinds of fears. And the pastors and ministers and people that I worked with that were, international and national level people, they were the same way. They just thought of it as, oh, well, we're being attacked. But I saw that it just wasn't working. I got to the point where I admitted that even though I had gone to Bible college and had a vast amount of scripture memorization, stuff, it just wasn't working as advertised. I wasn't getting keys to self-mastery and things like that. And that's so acknowledging that I didn't know, even though I knew lots, that was really the turning point for me. And after that, it just started a cascade of events that I had to take all the doctrinal knots that I had tied over years and untie them. But you can actually untie them very quickly once you know how. And yeah, I climbed out of all of that and started meditating, and got into esoteric things. And my mind is totally different now. But the fear of death is gone. The mental torment things I used to deal with in the church, they're all gone. But they're gone. I think through a process that I used to get rid of all this stuff. So.
Okay, and so if you had to give advice to somebody who is currently at a point where they no longer where they no longer believe in the mainstream church or whatever that they belong to, that they feel that they see the hypocrisy or they see the contradictions or what have you, and they are starting to consider the esoteric side of things. What kind of advice would you give to a person in a situation like that?
No, that's a great question. Jeremy and I, by the way, we haven't planned these questions. We're ad-libbing this. That's a fantastic question. Because I think for a lot of people, man, over the years, I've seen lots of people get disenchanted with their religion, or they see corruption and they leave, or they get offended, or somebody at a high place hurts their feelings, or even you know start doubting, just simply doubting the things they've been taught. And I think a lot of people I've seen this, they might leave that organization, especially with fundamentalist Christianity, the real hardcore types, like you're going to hell because all their friends and neighbors will be telling them that they're reprobate and they're backslidden, and man, they better come back to God and all this other bullshit that just puts more fear into them. But I think there's like millions of people that are in that valley, where like, and I've known them personally, where they've come out of that, like this thing that used to be so enchanted for them, and they don't really know what to do now. And a lot of times, if they haven't deconstructed a lot of the hooks in their brain, I've seen this where in the back of their mind, they might be out doing whatever the hell they want to do, but they still are tormented. They kind of think they're probably going to go to hell. Whatever percentage of them still buys into that. Like all that fear is still there because they haven't torn all those things down. And I think that for the simplest thing, I was talking to a mental health counselor recently who's kind of in that place. And in fact, he used the word, ironically, deconstructed. He said he had deconstructed a lot of the hooks of his religion, his upbringing, that he felt that he'd come to realize were toxic. But he didn't even go to the esoteric side. Like I was thinking about it tonight, Jeremy, given your typical audience, a lot of people have probably made the transition, but maybe a lot of them know people that are in this spot, where they're kind of, between two places, but not at either one, right? So the way I was explaining it to this counselor was that, when I went through that myself, and I won't necessarily maybe name specific things. I won't spend much time on it, but when I went through it myself, it was very destabilizing, especially when I learned that the scriptures were esoteric in nature, which is something we should definitely talk about. But that they're not literal, they're metaphors. That was for me at the time. This is many years ago, like 20 years ago, but it was very, very shaking at the time because even though I torched a lot of the toxic doctrines in my mind, um, I still kind of saw Jesus as literal, and yeah, these guys were still there. I'm still praying to Jesus, and I still saw it all literally. And so when that was brought into question, that this might all be metaphors, that was really, really shaking, man. I mean, I really felt like I didn't know up from down, left from right, right from wrong, anything for about 6 months. And I really didn't tell anybody what I was going through or dealing with because I wasn't sure where it was leading. But eventually, and it didn't take long, a couple years maybe, after I began to learn how to meditate, got peace in my mind for the first time through that, started to experiment with different uh, esoteric practices, and I'm a voracious reader, so I was reading everything. Uh, I saw later that it's kind of like this, like you have this treasure box that your great 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 grandma left you, and it's got all these pretty jewels and all these things on it. You think this box is awesome, it's beautiful, it's like your most prized possession. And then one day you find out that all the jewels on this box they're all worthless. They're not real diamonds. They're fake. They're not real rubies. They're fake. And that could, you're really disenchanted because you had this what you thought was a valuable heirloom, and then one day out of
Mm.
sheer you open the box and you find that it was never the treasure was always inside the box, and that's to me is the simplest way to kind of put in a parable the transition exoteric religion that's outside, understanding that all the world's religions are written about you and they're created about you, and the journey is internal.
I see. Yeah, that's a great analogy. Um, so, what so when you transitioned from exoteric religion to esoteric spirituality, you went from looking at the Christian mythos as a mythos rather than as literal history.
Correct.
And so then at that point, you were exploring the mystical side of things, the spiritual and esoteric side of the teachings. Did that lead you into Gnosticism at all, or Hermeticism? Like, where did that take you? Because now you are exploring all kinds of things that your former self wouldn't even conceive of that you would be into.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So for me, Jeremy, it was so if you guys don't mind, you'll hear me over if you ever spend much time with me. I'll quote the Bible sometimes, or Buddhist scriptures, or Taoist scriptures, or Nietzsche, or whatever I think shed some wisdom on the subject at the time. So if you ever hear me quote, this is for our audience, Jeremy, you know this, but if you ever hear me quote the Bible, I'm not really quoting it in a religious way. I'm really more quoting it as like a book of wisdom kind of thing. So, there's a parable in the Bible where Jesus says that you don't take new wine and pour it into old wineskins, because if you do, the skins will burst and the wine is wasted, and the skins are destroyed. But you need new wineskins, for new wine. So the process of what you just described for me was, and it was really the key. We'll talk about this in a minute, but the real key was knowing that in spite of all this stuff that I knew, and it was a lot more, far more than most in those circles, it still wasn't working. And that recognizing, okay, I don't know. Yeah, I know all this stuff, but I don't really know. And I'll even maybe invoke the Gnostic sense there. So that was a real key. And then for me, it was, you know, one doctrine at a time in the church. I kind of had to learn my way, like, the real meaning of the gospel, universal redemption, hell's a metaphor. What does it really mean? Jesus always spoke in parables. And then after many steps, I ended up at this place where, okay, it's all mythology. There's a book called the 16 Crucified Saviors, another one called The Greatest Story Ever Sold, where it talks about how the way that the author looks at it, this Christ myth has been passed down, and repeated in many different traditions, and it's all a bunch of BS and a con. But what she's not understanding is that it's not really that it's BS and a con, it's that there's perennial wisdom hidden in metaphor there, right? So it took me some years, to go from just learning one step out at a time. Now, I've known people in my life where they'll get one big revelation, one big jump out of the church on a doctrine or something, particularly teachers, and they'll kind of camp there for the rest of their life. I've seen that with people that get a hold of like justification by grace through faith. But for me, I was always even when I first became a Christian, it wasn't a social thing for me. I was really seriously trying to understand myself and master myself. That was my goal, and ultimately I didn't find it there. But for me, I had to kind of untie the doctrinal knots, then get introduced to this really broad world of esotericism. And I got to tell you what, guys, for somebody, while maybe people in this audience have already made that transition, you may know people that are, in that valley of the shadow of death, if you will, that place between two places. A really good, like 101 set of books for that kind of stuff is like stuff by Wayne Dyer. It's really pretty basic, and it's pretty simple, and doesn't take much to bridge, because Western culture, most people in the U.S. are Christians. I know not everybody is, but a lot of Christians here. So, he has kind of some really good 101 books to take you, into the world of mysticism and things like that. But just continued study, continued trying to find out answers, solutions, keys to self mastery. Like that's what kind of pulls me along even to this day. So, you kind of have to be an eternal student, but that's always true, I think, right? I think probably anybody on this, that's watching a video like this is probably a seeker.
Yeah, I think most of us think of this as a lifelong journey of learning and growing and evolving and such. I know I certainly think that way. And if you look through the videos on my channel, I started this channel about 13 years ago, I think. And if you look at the videos that I initially had put up about esoteric concepts, my views on it have evolved and changed quite a bit over the decade and a bit. But yeah, over my whole life, I've just constantly tried to learn more and continue to evolve my way of looking at the world and to explore multiple different worldviews, perhaps simultaneously. And like you, I went through a similar process where it was step by step, in the sense of, initially questioning some of the things that I was being taught in, the religion that I was, raised in, and which was, for me, was Catholicism. And just, questioning things here and there, and eventually coming to a point where the cognitive dissonance was too much. And I said, okay, I have to admit, this isn't for me and this isn't what I believe. And it left me with a feeling of that I still needed something, that I still had that craving or drive to participate in some sort of spiritual practice, some sort of community. And so I explored a bunch of different things, but ultimately I ended up looking at right hand path forms of mysticism and esotericism and occultism. A lot of it was inspired by Christian material, and especially, not at first, but eventually I ended up getting into some Gnostic material. And I was doing Golden Dawn style ritual magic, and I was participating in esoteric co-masonry, and a lot of very right hand path type things. And in that context, I eventually realized that I was a Luciferian. And that word Lucifer just kind of rang out for me. And it became like the core of that whole thing. I was like, that word, it just encapsulates so much of what I believe. And but it was a step by step process. You know, from 17 to somewhere in my 20s, before when I was at the point where I wasn't exoteric Christian anymore, and I'd become more esoteric, you know, non-affiliated Christian, I guess you could say, and eventually led to more and more deeper occult things, I guess you could say. It was a gateway drug. But eventually I found my way into realizing that I was Luciferian. Now, some people, they go directly. They realize this is all BS and I'm going to go for the left-hand path, like instantly. But they still have a lot of what you were referring to as doctrinal knots. These things in your psyche that are still influencing you based off of the brainwashing that you had received from the indoctrination of the religion that you're leaving. And so you will approach things from certain unstated assumptions. And some of those assumptions may be completely wrong. And so people will approach things like expecting it to be similar to the way that things operated in the religion that they had left. One of the things that I thought was interesting was there was a guy on the scene. He hasn't really been active in a long time, but his name was Edward O'Toole, and he had a series of books out on Luciferianism and left-hand path occultism, and he had this ceremony that he called the Rite of the, what was it, the Rite of the Unforgivable Sin, something like that. And there is one sin that cannot be forgiven, and it's the blaspheming the Holy Spirit. And so what he would do is he would say, okay, do this rite of the unpardonable sin. That's what it was called, the rite of the unpardonable sin. And you would do that, and it would essentially break all ties. It would mean that you could not be forgiven. And so that religion was essentially lost to you, like that you have no hope in in that you know modality or that system. That system, you've burned it, so might as well. It's like burning your ships, uh, you know, so that you don't retreat, because you can't retreat back into it if you've committed the unpardonable sin. I thought it was kind of a really extreme way of going about it, but it could work for some people if they want to kind of break free from the mental shackles. That might help if
Yeah,
it suits their personality to do something along those lines.
yeah, yeah. Burn the bridge behind them. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. I didn't when I left Jeremy. I didn't know. I didn't know about Luciferianism, or I would have still at the time when I was leaving the church, I still would have assumed that Satanism was evil or something like that. But I didn't know about any of this. But I learned enough to know that I deconstructed all the doctrines that kept me bound for years, and man, I couldn't get out the door fast enough. I mean, and that's one thing I would counsel people. The book you recommended to me, the Red Lion.
Oh yeah, the Red Lion.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, it's a
about.
fictional novel about like an alchemist.
Yeah, it's good, great. By the way, I'm about 4/5 of the way done. I'll probably be done in the next couple of days. But just last night I was reading that. There's a quote in there where he says, each person, and he's talking about from the level of a very high-ranking adept, that how with each person even God doesn't interfere, and you can only speak to them at their level and their capacity. So that in mind, and I always try to sense that. Obviously in a setting like this we can't sense that, right? We have to. Personally, I assume that the right people who need to see this video will run across it. But one thing you mentioned was cognitive dissonance, and when you first go through that in a really major way, and for me it was a single doctrine in the church, like 2 weeks or so after I acknowledged it, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I was confronted with this real pivotal, I think the most important doctrine if you're a Christian. I spent a year on that, just on that. And that set me free in so many ways. Just got rid of tons of torment out of my mind, things like that. So, and then I got drugged to the next thing.
What was it though? What was that one doctrinal
Well,
point?
yeah, it's a great question, and I'd love to. We can even talk about this one day. Jeremy's going to tell you guys later about some stuff we're going to be doing in the future. I'd love to talk about this in depth because it's really critical. Uh,
Oh yeah, we got some cool stuff coming up planned.
yeah, yeah. So in the type of churches I was in, which is the Assemblies of God, and I had connections and friends and other Pentecostal holiness fundamentalist type churches. Those churches were are I call it beat the sheep religion. Where they just really you can be an axe murderer and come to Jesus and you get a clean slate, but now you got to toe the line and do all this stuff, not just the law either, but all kinds of other stuff they make up, and it's absolutely torturous. It puts it's the whole book of Galatians is written against it. So for me, it was the doctrine of justification by grace through faith, like not this crap that I've been trying to do for years at that point where you get saved, right? Now you're a Christian and now you got to do all this shit. You better make sure you don't sin too much because you're going to go to hell, and you don't really know where that line is. That and there's no guarantee from Jesus, by the way, because in the scriptures it says many will come to him and say, Lord, Lord, we do all this cool stuff in your name, paraphrase but faithful there obviously, and he says, depart, I never knew you. So for me, going through about a year, Farmer's idea of justification by grace through faith, that yeah, your sins are placed on Christ, but also his righteousness is placed on you. So you're literally as righteous as Christ in as God in Christ. The Bible even says that you are the righteousness of God in Christ, right? Christ in you, the hope of glory. Really, really getting that. The book that actually helped me too, I ended up meeting an older gentleman out in California at a website. For about 25, 30 years, he ran this website and kind of defended this one doctrine. It's called presenttruthmag.org. I think it's still out there. He died a few years ago. But was Martin Luther's common two revelations. He had been a Catholic, I think a monk too, if I recall correctly. And but he had the same revelation that it's not about his righteousness, his penances, or whatever other religious bullshit he could do. It was the righteousness of Christ based upon you as a gift. And so that might sound trivial to somebody who's already well on the esoteric path, or would typically turn into a Luciferian type of broadcast. But at the time, for me, it went from being tormented to not tormented, like that one doctrine. Like, afraid of, am I doing enough? Am I avoiding enough? To just resting in this confidence that it's not my righteousness that kind of gives me the winning ticket. It really brought a tremendous amount of peace, with that first doctrine.
Okay. Yeah, that wasn't something that seemed like particularly important to me when I was Christian. But I bet you some people would resonate or relate to that, I'm sure.
Jeremy, one difference, I think, you were raised Catholic, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Catholic.
Yeah. So, in Catholicism, and this is a healthier psychological place to be for sure, I think. But, as long as you're in grace, you're in the church, you're good. Like you can really rest in that confidence if you believe what they tell you. It's a tremendous confidence. And if you do some heinous sin, you can go confess it, do some penances. Like there's a clear way out.
Yeah. Where you can kind of be at a clear state, within the rules of the church that they've got set up. You can kind of be relatively confident that you're in a state where your sins have been confessed and you've done your penance and you've been taking communion, and if you believe in that system, you can get some comfort from that for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's a much healthier psychological state to be in, where you have a way to cleanse your conscience. Like in the Old Testament, they used the scapegoat, right? Where the high priest would take the sins of the nations, lay his hands on the scapegoat, and they would drive it off into the wilderness, And so having that ability, some religions take a different approach. Like one of my favorite traditions I ever studied is Huna, the Hawaiian tradition, the kahunas and all that. And they deliberately only have one commandment, because if you have more than that, it creates what they call sin complexes in the mind. We can talk about that on a call one night, but and it actually begins to break up. It begins to jack up your psyche. Your subconscious is, even if you're not aware of it, is at war with everything that you're doing. And if you're a hypocrite who goes to church and it's a social thing for you, it won't bother you, right? Because you're not taking this stuff seriously. But I've seen so many people over the years. I've actually seen guys lose their mind because they were so tormented. Because in those holiness churches, there is no absolution. There's basically like, oh, you don't mind a crass. Can I give you a crass analogy that an international pastor once told me? It's not terrible.
Yeah, go for it.
So I was sitting down talking to this guy, and we were talking. I was trying to explain to him how we're justified by. This is, guys, by the way, they're tuning in. This is like 24 years ago, a long time ago. So I was trying to explain to him how it's the righteousness of Christ if the gospel is properly understood, not your own righteousness.
Okay.
And he said, I've been preaching the gospel for 35 years, but if I go out here and some guy's car get hit by a car, I'm going straight to hell. Like, that's literally what he told me. I couldn't believe he told me that at the time. I was just surprised to hear him use the language, sitting behind his desk at the international ministry. All right. But the point is that, like, that's how they see it. Like, they have they make up all this shit. Well, I'm not watching cable, and I'm not doing this thing, and I'm not. It's all this. None of that stuff is in the law anyway. It's all about the law. And the law says, and you do everything written in the book of law. So in those settings, you're heaping this giant pile of commandments plus church tradition, and there's no way in those settings to get absolution, to feel like you're guaranteed. It's a very tormented place. I've seen people. I was in Guatemala one time. Saw a dude literally lose his mind. He'd been tormented for months before this. Went and picked up a big monitor off the stage and threw it off the pastor. Tried to hit him in the head. The Guatemalan government almost didn't let him bring him back. So I've seen this stuff drive people crazy. So from my perspective, that Catholic view is much healthier. It gives you, it gives you a means for forgiveness and washing of the consciousness, and the Protestant fundamentalist churches make no attempt to do that. They have no mechanism for it.
And what about occult paths and esoteric practices and the esoteric lens? How does that fit into that?
Well, honestly, if you, this is not a first step for me. This is years in the making, but eventually you got to ask yourself, why the hell was I under this law? Okay, I only thought I was a sinner because some asshole told me I was, right? And they gave me this book that they told me was God's book, and they gave me all this stuff. And that happened when I was a child, of course.
Right.
I got to play. It's like, why would you want to be under the Old Testament law? 613 commandments that it says in there, and this is again a quote. It says, "Accursed is everyone who continues not to do everything written in the book of the law." So it has to be upheld perfectly. And it says in the Bible that because of the law, all men are held as sinners. So, now being much farther down the road, it's like, why would you subjugate yourself? Somebody put a whole bunch of rules out there, I think all that's bullshit now. I mean, I don't, I'm not under the Old Testament law, and don't want to be, and don't really need a new law either.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I feel like at one point, a lot of these teachings were very esoteric, and that was the primary way that they were interpreted. But then they got co-opted by the mainstream, became, official religion of the Roman Empire with the Constantine, right?
Yep.
And then it got politicized, and it became a tool for subjugating the masses, really, which was the opposite of what it originally it intended to be, or what it had originally been at the beginning.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's what Rome did politically, religious Rome did religiously. And if you look like, I'm not a Roman historian, but from what I know, they'd surround a city and say, look, you can give up and just join Rome and pay us some taxes and keep all your culture and you're good. And everybody walks away, or we can come in there and kill you. Then, then you're going to do what we told you to do anyway, and they choose to fight or not. So in a similar way, when Constantine did take over the church, if you're new to this, if you study Gnosticism, which Jeremy mentioned, and there's tons of websites out there and Gnostic churches and things like that. But if you study that even for a little while, study these esoteric things for a little bit, then go read the New Testament. It is absolutely indisputable. Christianity was Gnostic in nature when it started, and when they militarized it and they made it a world power, they really did exactly what political Rome did. Like, I remember reading about this one area they took over where the Celtic gods and goddesses were worshipped, right? So they come in, this is the church now, not the government, on paper anyway. So, and they say, oh, you can keep your temple to bring it over here and keep the flame burning, and you can keep all this stuff. We're just going to come in here and teach about Jesus' love. They did the same thing with the Huna in Hawaii. They come in under the banner of love, right? And once they get in there, like if you look at what happened in the Hawaiian Islands, they basically, the youngest generation, which are also inherently always the most foolish, they all jumped on board. Then, they start telling the younger people that they've now converted, hey, by the way, your grandfather over here, who's a kahuna, he's using demons to do all that stuff. Your aunt is going over here to Brigitte's temple and worshiping. She's actually praying to demons. Then they get the young, foolish ones, against the older ones, and they chase them all around. The rest is history. So it's Christianity was originally Gnostic in nature. If you, just like I said, read like The Laughing Jesus, the Gnostic Gospels, maybe by Elaine Pagels. That's a great book. And then go read the New Testament again, and Jerry, I know you know this. I'm saying it for the benefit of our audience, that it's indisputable that Christianity was Gnostic when it started. It's mystical in nature. Mithraism was a contemporary religion. It taught the exact same thing, using the exact same metaphors, just with different names. And they turned it into a literal thing. And I think perhaps, let me just leave it there for a minute. Go ahead, Jeremy. Your tag.
Yeah, so let's move forward and where did the esoteric path guide you, even like beyond just looking at things symbolically in the Christian mythos, as you know, looking at it as a mythos rather than as literal, and that, you know, obviously took you a certain ways. What happened after that? Like, did you explore any specifically esoteric schools like Rosicrucianism or Hermeticism or anything along those lines?
Yeah, I did a lot. There were it was a couple years in. I started out with just like Wayne Dyer type, 101 type materials and meditating. Um, and I would say one of the most, if not the most pivotal thing for me was becoming aware of my own awareness through meditation, right? Where you no longer, like, you actually realize that this is a form of gnosis. Once this happens to you, that you're really not your body. This thing that you used to worry about dying or whatever, it's not you. And so I think that's like probably the most pivotal point that anybody can come to. But after that, yeah, I started trying, because I was kind of trying to find, okay, well, who else? Now keep in mind, guys, for those who are listening, this is like 2001, so the internet was much more nascent, less filtered, I'll grant, but much more nascent in nature. And you know, it was a burgeoning, growing thing, but there weren't nearly as many resources. So I started trying to find, you know, other like-minded people. And I did at one point join the Golden Dawn. Some weird stuff happened, as Jeremy, you know about, and like temple shut down immediately. I looked at Rosicrucian, read a lot of their stuff. I did a lot of reading, because honestly, it was kind of like, once bitten, twice shy. I had just spent 3 years climbing my way out of burning this cage down around me that had kept me in prison since I was a kid. I'm not saying that all of Christianity is toxic, by the way, but the flavors of it that I were definitely toxic. So, so I climbed out of that, and I wasn't eager to jump back into another cage. I was being very careful and trying to like research as much to figure out where some of these paths were leading. And I went through everything. I mean, Satanism, and I met probably about this time, and Luciferian Research Society webpage. Just tons and tons and tons of reading. The Witch's Bible, and really good one-on-one book by the Kabbalion, of course. That's esoteric. Reading that, a lot of Manly Hall stuff, some of it, Joseph Reed. So just voraciously reading and trying to find. I began to be able to see after a while where some of these paths led. Like, some of them were just flaky, Fruit Loopy, New Age stuff. I didn't want to waste time with that. I wasn't looking to, just be in a social group and have some feelings. I was looking for tools to use to grow. And then once I started to find out about some of the serious orders, really, once you see where there's some of those paths lead to some questionable areas. And I just was being very careful about it. So, on the one hand, looking back, would I have grown more if I plugged into an order and kind of, grow to some significant level of adepthood? Perhaps. Um, anyway, yeah. So it, eventually led me to talking to you lots over the last 20 years, and I'm kind of right now where I've kind of settled on is things that you and I are working on together, and then also the Franz Martin material. That's kind of what I've drilled down to myself, is was Ferri and the Martin material, and just working on that the next few years. But I would say, just having gone through all that and deconstructed so much, one of the things I'll say that for people that to speed up the process is hold everything loosely. Don't go if you just come out of one, if you don't mind me saying this, idolatrous camp. Don't be in a hurry to jump into another one. Really, I think going through the process of unlearning stuff, the more you do it, the faster you get at it, to where you really can let anything go very quickly. Like something that appeared in my life to now that I totally don't even see, and because I don't really hold on to much of those things that I know of. There's nothing like that. No, none of those, cage bars left. But if something did become apparent to me, I can let that stuff go very quickly. So as you go through more and more of that, I think it makes you able to transform more quickly. Am I answering your question? Pardon for the digress.
To be honest, I can't remember what my question.
That's the Rosicrucianism and other things you're asking.
Right. Yeah, no, that answered it. And yeah, I'm sure some people would be interested in hearing what your experience with the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, or at least like a tidbit, a quick a quick anecdote.
Yeah, it's a quick story, and I've read tons of the Golden Dawn material. It's available. A lot of the Israel regarding material, of course, and other stuff. And so I went to Charlotte and was initiated, and was working with this guy. Everybody was really cool, very nice people, and I was starting to do some of the basic exercise they give everybody, which this is not secret knowledge. It's out there in the public domain of the lesser advanced.
Yeah. Was this like the Cicero affiliated one, or do you remember who was like running it?
Yeah, the head of the order. If I heard his last name, Jeremy, I'd recognize Robert something. I can't hear you all of a sudden.
Yeah, Robert Zink.
Yes.
That's hilarious. That's actually the one that I was a part of as well.
Okay.
Which I have a video up on it, and I refer to it as a cult.
Well, that's the one I went to, and so it's a real short story. Again, I was very gun shy, man. I mean, you dump 20 years of your life into something. Well, I didn't really put myself in. I was kind of planted there by my parents. I eventually did become a Christian in my own decision after my senior year of high school, and so the last 13 years of it was very arduous, study. I mean, lots of study, lots of hard work, working with ministries and things like that. So, it wasn't a social thing for me. I wasn't playing around. I was really serious about it. But having had this thing that was such a, hell, I was afraid of that stuff in my life back when I was 7 or 8 years old. I wasn't eager to jump into something without my guard up, So when I finally did decide, after looking at several other different orders, to join the Golden Dawn, they pair you up with somebody you can call, whatever your questions. And so after, I think, about 3 weeks tops, I was calling the guy that I was kind of paired with, and a real nice guy named Mark, and he wouldn't answer the phone. And we'd only spoken a couple of times, maybe 3 or 4 times, but then I kept calling, he wouldn't answer the phone. And because I called Robert Zink before I got initiated to find out where would be the closest place to me, I called him up and said, "Hey, man, I've been trying to get a hold of my contact over here at the order for 3 weeks." And he goes, "Yeah, that temple went dark, Larry." He goes, "I'm sorry, the whole temple went dark." I have no idea what that means, but I assume it's not good. and I, at that time, man, like I said, I was really gun shy. And so I thought, well, that's just pretty fucking weird, So I just kind of stayed on my own. And on the one hand, it would have been cool to have been, in a Hogwarts type order. I could have got a lot of cool stuff. Jeremy's been gracious, guys, to give me. We've talked for hundreds of hours, starting with much more elementary stuff than we can converse about now. And I thank Jeremy for that. But aside from that, I've kind of been on my own, doing my own practices. I read voraciously. It would be cool to be in a really good order, but I just recently joined your order, of course, and that's great. But during that time, it would have been really cool to be in a good order, but I just couldn't find one. I live, we're part of Florida I live in is really small towns and stuff. That stuff doesn't exist anywhere near here, not really within hundreds of miles. So, but it does. I would say it has the advantage, having gone that path, being at a stand like at the crossroads, sometimes for a really long time, and still be able to just stand. There's actually some value in that, I think, in being able to be comfortable at the crossroads. So,
yeah, absolutely. I think it's, in Tibetan Buddhism, they refer to it as a bardo, in between place. And I feel like that is where you have the most freedom. And even in that tradition, they say that that is the most potent place to be in if you want to achieve enlightenment, is that Bardo state. It's that place where there's a lot of different bardos, but one bardo is a place where you have let go of one set of beliefs and you haven't yet latched on to another set. You're just kind of, like you said, sitting at that crossroads and just being comfortable abiding there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a not for everybody for sure. Not, and that's great information, by the way. I was familiar with the concept of bardos, but I didn't realize that specific thing was a bardo because that describes it perfectly. But there's a lot of some things for those of you that are on that path, or maybe solo practitioners, if you will. Being able to, I understand the tension, but being able to stand for long times, being able to be alone for a significant amount of time, as far as what you have going on in here with versus what you can share with your social group. I think most people find you will build a social group around you. I have a handful of friends of people Jeremy's one of them that I can talk to about these things very openly. It's great. I'd rather have one of those than 10,000 fake friends, but there's a lot of lessons that can be learned there. I think it builds a lot of strength too. So downside is it's not. I haven't really experienced this, but I visualize it. Probably not as cool as hanging out with 15 people who can talk about all the same shit every week.
Yeah.
I doubt there's 15 within 1,000 miles of where I live.
Well, you might be surprised because I mean I know this was Toronto, but at one point I was having in-person meetups to discuss Luciferian and other esoteric subjects, and people would take turns giving prepared talks. And at the Toronto one, we were getting like 30 people,
Wow.
regularly to these things. It wasn't every week, but it was, once or twice a month, sometimes once every other month. But we were, meeting here and there in person. And, at first it wasn't. At first it was just like the first time that I'd done this. And this was under the Greater Church of Lucifer, later called the Assembly of Light Bearers. But the very first meeting, I had set up just like a study room, which, could hold maybe like 10 people at the most, or 8 or something, at a local library. I just got the room for free. And I, promoted the event and everything. And I had, and I said, okay, let's show up at this time or whatever. I showed up. Nobody was there at all. And so I waited for like, 8 minutes or so. And I was like, okay, I don't care. I'm going to do my talk that I had prepared. And so I set up my camera and I was going to record it, and I was going to just give the talk to an empty room as if there were people there, and then still post it online and just move forward, but I was still going to do it. And just before I started, 2 people showed up, and and I was like, oh, thank goodness, like thank the Dark Lord, that that at least 2 people showed up. But then it continued to grow, and like I said, it got to the point where we were regularly getting like 30 people. So that organization we ended up turning it into an open source resource. People can access that information and utilize it for whatever they feel like they want to utilize it for. There's a few reasons for that it's beyond the scope of this video, but what I'm trying to do with the Novus Ordo Luciferi, which you had mentioned that you are a member of, and which this meeting that we're having right now is a meeting of the Ontario local branch of the Novus Ordo Luciferi. What I'm trying to do with that is regain some of that same community that we had back in at the peak of the GCOL ALB days, and have online meetings like this. There's going to be in-person meetings similar to this, but in person. We'll be doing interviews. We'll be doing prepared talks, and there'll even be meetings where we do group rituals, group ceremonies, and we have those special ones set up for that. And people can attend. A lot of these meetings are public, so you don't even necessarily need to be a member to attend a lot of these meetings. Some of them are members only, but a lot of the meetings are open to the public that can come and attend and observe and see what's happening and learn. And that is in alignment with the Luciferian drive to, share knowledge with others, just to make it available to those who are looking for it. And so that's Peter in the chat said, I would love to find a good order. I live in Jacksonville, Florida. Well, there is a Novus Ordo Luciferi. You can look into that by just going to novusordoluciferi.org, and the link is in the description of. Oh, cool. Peter is on the Luciferian Research Society Discord. Yeah, I'm actually wearing a Luciferian Research Society shirt. But so that's cool. Peter, send me a message and I can give you some information about that. We do have at least a couple people in Florida already, and so oh, my favorite shirt. Cool. So yeah, look into that. Send me a message. I'll give you some information. You can ask me whatever you need to about that. And anybody else who's watching this, if you are interested in learning more, go to the link in the description. And if you still have any questions, feel free to ask me directly. And the other thing that I wanted to mention, and you're going to be attending this, Larry, is in less than a week from today, on August 6th, there's going to be a lucid dreaming course beginning, a 4-week course, and each session is 90 minutes, starting at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on every Tuesday, starting on August 6th. And it's $45 American to join. But if you are a member of the Novus Ordo Luciferi, you get access to the course for free. And ongoing, there'll be other courses following this as well. And members of the NOL, the Novus Ordo Luciferi, also get access to those courses going forward. For a lot, there's going to be a lot of courses going forward. Tarot, alchemy, meditation, a bunch of different topics we're going to go over. And if you are a member of the NOL, then you get access to these courses as a perk of membership. If you've got your membership dues paid up, then you can get access to this course. And Larry, you actually attended a previous run of the Lucid Dreaming 4-week course. What did you think of that?
Oh, it was great. It was great. Great beginning to it, and I ordered the 3 books you recommended. If you guys look at, if you don't mind me pointing it out, jeremycrow.com, under he's got lucid reading and astral travel. So those 3 books Jeremy recommended I pick up. So I got all 3 of them. And, got 2 of them shipped here this week. So looking forward to round 2 and definitely going through those books.
Cool. Yeah, a lot of people said that they really enjoyed the course, and we went into some pretty in-depth stuff there at a few points there, getting into even like dream yoga and sleep yoga and the void, of non-experience, and yeah, we get into some pretty deep stuff. It's actually a better deal if you are just looking at the financial side of things. If you want to participate, is to join the NOL. You can either pay monthly through Patreon for $5 a month, and so you could even just do a month of membership to get access to the course for $5, and then decide whether or not you want to continue participating in the order. Or you can spend $10 more than what the course would have been and spend $55, and you get a whole year of NOL membership for the $55. And so you get access to all the courses that I'll be teaching in a 12-month period. So I really encourage you to look into the NOL, the Novus Ordo Luciferi, even if you are just interested in the courses that I'll be teaching live. These aren't pre-recorded courses that you go through on your own time. We have a schedule, and we meet live as a group, and we go over the material, and then we have question and answer, and it's interactive. And then over the course of the next week, there's homework, and then we come back together and we discuss how things went, and we can workshop any problems that have come up. And it's not like I said, it's not a pre-recorded course or anything like that. It's live. Now, if you do miss a session, each session is recorded and will be available to the people that enrolled in the course to go over if they couldn't make the live session. So you will still get access to that lesson and the material, and you'll get to see all the questions and answers that came up during that session. Another thing too, we as in Larry and I, are looking at doing a second season of the Luciferian Research Society podcast. So it was a very long time ago that myself and a member named Matt, he and I produced a series of, I think it was about 6 episodes of the Luciferian Research Society podcast. Larry and I are looking at doing another season of that, which we would go in depth and discuss specific topics, sometimes taking multiple episodes on the same subject to get really in depth and explore some of the deeper aspects of these things, and not just gloss over it on a superficial level, but really dig into it. And yeah, do you want to talk a bit about the plans that we had for that from your perspective, what I hadn't mentioned yet?
Yeah, definitely, Jeremy. Yeah, guys, I can tell you, when I first was kind of crossing the esoteric boundary, if you would, I ran across Jeremy through the Luciferian Research Society's website, and he was kind enough to we had phone calls, I had questions about things, and over the years, as I've actually kind of grown up, Jeremy was already way deep in the esoteric stuff. I've kind of grown up from a Christian to that. But man, we have had some of the most amazing conversations, he and I. I mean, sometimes we've been on the phone 3-4 hours at a time. And it's like, man, I wish we had this shit recorded because it's so good. The content is so good. And we get into shadow work and, all kinds of things. Not that just all we can share is our experiences, right? The things we've learned. And we can only teach as far as we can go. But I'm just telling you, some of these conversations have just been just fantastic. I can't. So what we decided to do is we're going to take this stuff, these subjects that sometimes we unpack over hours on the phone, and we're just going to start talking about them. I think, Jim, we're going to do two per week, right? That the goal?
Yeah, I mean, if we can handle that kind of a schedule, then it would be great if we can try and get 2 a week, if possible. It would be a lot easier if we do them live rather than edited.
Yeah, and
We
what's
could probably get more content out like that, and share more knowledge with people and share conversations.
agreed. Yeah, so we're gonna, guys. I'll tell you, some of these conversations I've had are memory, are just burned in my memory. Just fantastic stuff that we've talked about. So we decided we're going to take a lot of these subjects that we've spent, about 20 years talking about, and we're just going to talk about them until we're done. So like the introductory thing we did tonight, and this is for anybody who's listening to this after the fact on YouTube. We're going to be going much deeper into that. Like we don't even have an agenda. We don't have a script. Jeremy and I have had so many hundreds of hours of conversations. We're just going to pick up the torch and run with it and talk about, there's a lot more details in that. Honestly, hours of conversation we can have, ways to get over cognitive dissonance, to improve the speed with which you can read things, methods I've found useful for finding truth. I mean, Jeremy shared with me about the shadow. There's just so much there. Anyway, so we're going to take that original subject about moving to esoteric, and we're just going to talk about it till we're done. And then we're just going to pick up other subjects after that. Each time we're just going to talk about it until we felt like we've wrung everything out of it. So what'll help too is the questions and things that we'll get from people in emails, and also from these settings like this, that will fuel the conversation even more. So I think it's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm super psyched about it. One of the things that I think will be cool, that we had in the original series of episodes for the Luciferian Research Society. So, just in case people don't know what the Luciferian Research Society is, this is like a community center or a community hub that I founded back in 2008 as a website, which is essentially its own social media platform, you could say, just to make it easy. But it's for people who think like us, like think along these lines, people who are on the left hand path, iconoclasts, free thinkers, Luciferians, and people who, feel a resonance with that sort of thing. And it's not an order. It doesn't have degrees. It doesn't have its own teachings, even really. It's just a place where people can connect with one another and collaborate on projects, share knowledge, cross pollinate from between different branches of the left hand path, or beyond. And it's been around for a long time. There is a Discord server that is free to join that's associated with it. The website itself costs to access the membership website. It's $1 a month. But if you're a Novus Ordo Luciferi member, then you get free access to the LRS website. But if you want, you can just join the Discord server, and there's a lot of activity there, and it's pretty cool. There's a lot of people with a lot of different interesting experiences and opinions and knowledge that they're willing to share and discuss with earnest people who come on there looking to have a good conversation. So yeah, the LRS, that's what the LRS is. And it's about sharing knowledge and cross-pollinating and getting more of a collaboration amongst various different branches within the occult, and especially within what people usually refer to as the left-hand path. The Novus Ordo Luciferi is an esoteric order. It does have specific occult teachings that members get access to and can practice and get guidance, and has a structure to it. So that's the difference between those two things, if you were wondering at this point. But the one of the cool things about the first series of episodes of the Luciferian Research Society podcast was that we had contributions from members of the LRS that would, share music that they had created with us, or artwork, or they would participate in some of the projects that we had. Like, for example, there was one on tarot an episode on tarot. And to prepare for that, one of the things that I did was I had asked members of the LRS if they wanted to submit a question that would be answered on the podcast. And I did a few different divinations, quick divinations that those people that were part of the community. And so that community connection, that I want to include that in these episodes too in some way, so people could send us like audio clips of them explaining some concept that they had been thinking about, or their music, or things like that, and we can play those on the podcast as part of this community contribution to the episode. And I think that that would be really cool. So not just the conversations will be the meat of it, but we'll throw in these contributions from the community and have that interaction with that as well, which I think was really fun and a really fun part of the original series. Did you have anything else you wanted to say or promote, or any last thoughts that you had meant to say that you didn't manage to during the rest of it,
Yeah,
Larry?
yeah, a couple things, Jeremy. Thanks. So I get about two things I had back. Yeah, guys, some of the I can tell you if you hear this recorded or if you're on live now, I can't stress enough some of the conversations that Jeremy and I have had. It just so in depth and so amazing. So I can't wait to share that. I wish I had recording of those things for years, but also what you guys are going to bring to the table as far as questions, input, things like that. I think it's going to be fantastic. So um, that's that. And yeah, just we'll be probably cranking out a whole lot of content this year, I hope. Looking forward to it very much, man.
Yeah, same here. It's going to be fun. I've got a lot more time this year than I have previously in order to devote to these types of things, and I'm looking forward to helping to encourage community and events both online like this, as well as in-person events around the world. It'd be cool to have events. I'm sure there'll be events in Florida because we already have at least a couple people, such as Larry, yourself, and we have at least one other member that's in Florida as well. So I'm sure we're going to have meetings there, in-person events on occasion, and elsewhere. We already have members in at least 8 countries for the Novus Ordo Luciferi. So it's off to a good start. We've only been around for about 6, maybe 7 months now. And yeah, 7 months, I guess. And we already have members in like 8 countries. So it should be fun. I haven't been really kind of blasting out the existence of this order, but you're going to hear more from us as we produce more content in terms of other meetings, like Novus Ordo Luciferi meetings. Larry and I are going to do LRS podcast episodes, and we're going to do a lot. We're going to try and share as much information and knowledge as we can, make it available to the public, light a torch, and pass it forward and see what we can do.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks again for agreeing to be on today, Larry. And we're going to see a bunch more of you going forward. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with us today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the invite, Jeremy, and thanks for anybody who attended and anybody who listens after the fact. Appreciate all you guys. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no problem. And I'll talk to you real soon then. And have a great evening.
Okay, sounds great, guys. Take it easy.
Okay, bye. Okay, so that was Larry L. And I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. that meeting, this public meeting of the Ontario, Canada obelisk of the Novus Ordo Luciferi. We do have a couple more guests lined up. These next two that we have lined up here are actually Ontario residents. They are not members of the Novus Ordo Luciferi, but they are involved in the esoteric and occult community in Toronto, in particular, and Thelema, in particular. These two next individuals that I have lined up for to be guest speakers on subsequent Ontario obelisk meetings, such as this. We have a couple people that are into Thelema, that are in the Toronto community, that we can talk about what type of activities they're up to, and I think it'll be fun. We've worked together before. I've done I've given talks with them before. They've given talks with me uh, that I've hosted, and etc. And they also have a lot of events that they want to share with our audience as well. So that should be fun. Keep in touch. Subscribe to this channel. There is a Novus Ordo Luciferi channel that is on YouTube that this live stream will be uploaded to after the fact. All meetings of the NOL that are public will get uploaded there, whether they're from the Ontario branch or from Florida or from Brazil, Mexico, anywhere that is operating. Are going to take all of the public meetings from that and upload them on the Novus Ordo Luciferi YouTube channel and other platforms. So find us there as well, and you can find the link to that on the website novusordoluciferi.org.